I'm Jacki Short, Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and I'd like to welcome you to our new podcast series, What is Creative Therapy? In this series, you'll get to hear from some of the leading clinicians and presenters in this field in Australia and internationally. You'll find out how using creative therapies can help you better engage with your clients of all ages, and you'll get ideas about effective tools and strategies to help others express, explore, and resolve difficulties with methods that go deeper than words. Today, I'm excited to welcome Natalie Mackenzie, a drama therapist who's running some workshops for us in Sydney. And the workshop she's running is called Drama in Therapy, Action Methods for Learning, Insight and Growth. These workshops will be held in both May and November this year. Natalie has always been fascinated at how role play, stories and drama have the power to foster creativity, imagination, learning, insight and personal growth. She obtained her master's degree in drama therapy from Roehampton University in London and is a registered drama therapist with ANZATA, Australia and New Zealand Arts Therapy Association. Natalie is also a member of the British Association of Drama Therapists in the UK. She's passionate about empowering children and their families to cope with life's challenges in creative ways. She has over 10 years' experience working with children who've suffered emotional trauma. She's worked in a therapeutic centre for children who've experienced abuse, neglect, grief and loss, and is the founder of Playful Minds, an organisation providing individual and group drama therapy programs to support children's mental health. Currently, Natalie is working with children whose parents are in alcohol and drug rehabilitation, as well as providing individual and group drama therapy programs to support anxiety, emotional regulation, and social skills. Her creative approach supports children and young people in dealing with life's serious stuff. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. It's lovely to have you here today. Natalie, can you tell us a little bit about how you started in this field of drama therapy?
Yeah, so drama therapy is a very, very small profession in Australia, and I'd never actually even heard of the word that such a profession even existed. But from a very young age, I was always really interested in the therapeutic side of the creative arts, whatever that was. And I was always kind of fascinated by that link between what working creatively allowed you to do. And it was actually in my final year at school when my drama teacher said to me, you know, Nat, have you thought about drama therapy? And I guess it was one of those light bulb moments. And I still actually remember even where I was in the classroom where I was sitting when he said it. And it was just suddenly a lot of things fell into line for me. And I started to look at, great, well, that's, you know, this is what I want to go and pursue. And so kind of went down that path of looking at how I could train and study in this particular therapy.
Wonderful. So from a pretty early age, you were sure that this was the trajectory you were going to go on. But because it's such a small industry here, is it right then that you had to go abroad to do your study?
Yeah, so there's no sort of formal training here as yet. There's different versions or different possibilities for sure. But I knew that I had to either go to the US or the UK, where it's much more established as an intervention and as a therapy. And so I went over to the UK and studied in London, did my master's over there, and got some, you know, some clinical experience as well, and obviously was part of a much bigger community before the time was there to come home to the sunny shores of Sydney and bring this work home.
Wonderful. And for those of us who don't really know much about drama therapy, can you tell us kind of simply what it is and how it might be different to other forms of therapy?
The way that I explain it to both clients that I work with and other professionals is that really it's a type of therapy that uses drama and theatre as a therapeutic tool. And so what that means is that I will use things like storytelling, role, character, small object work, play, to engage clients in finding ways to express what they might struggle with expressing with words alone. So what I think makes drama therapy quite unique is that we're engaging the whole body. So we're not just a cognitive way of working, we're actually stepping into imaginary lands, or into stories, or into role, or into character. And I think that's that's its uniqueness, is that the whole self becomes engaged in the therapeutic process.
Are there any examples you could give of how this might have worked with any children or young people you work with?
Yeah. So a classic kind of example that, that I sort of explain might be if a child's referred to me for issues with anger. And so we might explore their anger as if it was a volcano. And rather than just talking about this volcano, we might physically create this volcano in the space. So using fabric, using cushions, using whatever means we like to literally create this volcano. And then we can step inside the volcano and we can see if anyone lives there. So we might meet some characters that live in this volcano, and we might be able to find out very indirectly what it is that makes these characters so angry, and what's it like to feel like this. And we can then see, well, if they're getting so angry, what's going to happen when this volcano explodes? And are there any characters that are outside the volcano that might get affected by it? So it's a very indirect way of working. We're using the story that we're creating together and the roles that we're in to understand, what might help to calm this volcano down. I think that
it sounds like a very lived experience, as you said, a very embodied experience then of this child being able to explore their anger in, I guess, what we would say in a psychological sense, in an externalized way, and even using some of those narrative and Gestalt traditions of being able to see and converse with parts of self. Where do you see those kind of methods as fitting with drama therapy?
Yeah, I think there's definitely lots of overlap, and I find, the more people that I talk to from all sorts of professions will see the work that I'm doing with their own lens, whether that's Gestalt or narrative therapy, play therapists, art therapists, whoever it is. And so really, I love talking about that in terms of the lens that I'm looking at it as a drama therapist, and so as a drama therapist, I might look at that as, well, what is the child's role that they feel that is most easily played by them? So are they always in the role within the volcano? I wonder what it would be like for them to try on a new role and see what it would be like to step into another role and build some empathy around that. So I think there is definitely overlaps, and I think other therapists would see this and go, oh yeah, that's very familiar way to them as well. But it's the lens that I'm looking at it in terms of their roles and their ability to engage in play as well.
Yeah, excellent. Have you found any particular challenges with using drama therapy in either individual or groups that you run?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge would have to be the word drama. And I'm sure even in selling this, any of the trainings that I do, I think we all come with this idea of, oh my gosh, I remember when I was at school and I had to stand up on the stage and I had to perform and I forgot my lines. And so I think that would be the biggest challenge, is actually almost removing the word drama and saying what we're here to do is look at stories and imagine, use our imaginations and play. I think that would be the biggest thing. And often those barriers might come from, particularly when working with children, from the parents, because they come with their own stories, or even other clinicians that I might work with. It's kind of them getting through their own barriers around what drama is. And really, the whole world is full of dramas. We're all living in a drama in our lives, and so it's really about playing with that and being able to experiment with what our stories might look like. So I'm always, on one hand, I love leading with the word drama, in that it really challenges people's notion of what that word means. But I'm also very aware of what that story in itself conjures up for a lot of people. Yeah.
I think that's one of the challenges in the expressive arts industry generally, the perception that we have to be very good technically at any of these things in order to be good as therapists within these areas. And I think certainly in the fields of art and play, where I have a bit more expertise, I tell people all the time, in fact, the better you are at that, sometimes the worse you are in facilitating it, because we need to be able to really focus on that for others. So, given that is a challenge, what's one of the ways that you manage that? What might people expect from your training?
Yeah. I go very slow. So I'm not expecting anyone to, and this is both within training, but also within the therapy space as well. It's a very slow, gradual, stepped process, which is, which I'll explain in the training around. There's a lot of ritual involved in drama therapy to ensure that there's that the client or people being trained feel really safe to step into being something other than themselves. So it is very gradual, and I start from a place of where everyone is feeling safe, and work from there. The first thing that I often do in a training situation is invite people to take off their adult hat, so literally to take it off, and to put on a playful hat. And to just imagine being wearing a different hat for the hours that we're going to be together. So yes, don't fear. I won't. I always also say in my work, it's not about being a star performer. I'm not. That's not what the work is. It's really around being playful.
What would you say have been some of your biggest wins, or are there any sort of memorable moments that you've had therapeutically in working particularly with children and young people? And I understand that you can use this method across the age span, but this is what your workshop will focus on. Any particular examples that are striking for you that you think could illustrate it for others?
Yeah, I think there are many. A couple that come to mind is around where I've worked with children and parents, and being able to translate for parents the language of the child. Using a lot of creative modalities to help get a child to a place where they're able to express their feelings and express what's going on for them, and then being able to support them to be able to communicate that to their child has been a really wonderful way for a new language to be developed between a family. Another sort of example that kind of comes to mind about why I love this creative way of working is recently I worked with a young person in an early psychosis unit that I work in. And she described using fabric that I had. She picked a particular piece of fabric which she labelled as her trauma. And we were able to work with this piece of fabric without ever having to name the trauma, to go into the trauma, to dissect the trauma, to look at it. We could look at it through the eyes of this, of this piece of cloth that she chose. And what I loved about it was I have no idea what her trauma was, but she obviously does. And so she's able to relate to this piece of cloth in her way, and I'm able to support her in that purely through that creative process. And I think what that does is really highlight how the client has all the power within the therapeutic relationship within drama therapy. And I find, you know, for particularly working in psychosis, where there's a lot of lack of control of their mental health, it's just such a beautiful example of where this young woman had control of you know, and was able to hold it in her hands and have control of that session, which you know, which I just supported her in. Yeah.
Do you think it's necessary for children and young people to be able to give voice and to verbalise things that have happened to them? How important is it for you to, or how necessary do you think it is for people to actually speak out everything that's happened?
Yeah, I would argue that it's not important, that it's, I guess what you were referring to, that kind of lived experience. So there's a thing in drama therapy called the life drama connection, which is often talked about, and different drama therapists have different thoughts around that. But essentially what it means is, if I put on a role and I've played a role, what's similar and different about me to the role that I've just played? And again, you know, within drama therapy, a child can play a role and have no sense of how connected that is with themselves or not. And another child might be very concrete in thinking and have a very close life drama connection, that this is, you know, I'm actually playing me, or I'm playing my mother, or I'm playing my friend. So I think, you know, within the safety of the drama therapy session, children and young people are able to act out all sorts of fantasies and thoughts and feelings that they have, and they're safely confined and contained within that process. And that, you know, that in itself is hugely therapeutic for some children. And also, just to add the non-verbal approach, you know, that not all kids have the language or want to have the language. I work with a number of children who are quite non-verbal, and how fantastic that they can still express themselves in some form which doesn't rely on the verbal. You know, I had a recent session where a young girl doesn't really speak at all, but she was able to communicate so much and essentially have a conversation around bravery using some small figurines that we were using, and kind of placing them in relationship with one another and exploring this idea of what makes us brave. And there were no words exchanged at all from her. So, yeah.
These methods sound fabulous for both children and young people in helping them express and explore their concerns, and to be able to share with you and to know themselves that they're putting it out there. Does it actually resolve issues, or is it just about expression?
So, you know, every client is different and every client's process is going to be very different. But much like with the example of the volcano, the exploding volcano, part of the work is, how do we tame this volcano? How do we calm this down? And what are some strategies that we can use to really, you know, to really help this volcano not explode so violently. So all through it, it's learning through the stories or through the characters that are created, and then integrating that into ourselves. You know, is the process. So yes, there's a lot of expression, but it's how do we, you know, how do we find solutions for these problems. It's part of why so many stories have lasted for many, many, many generations and years, because there's so much learning to be had in them. Yeah, so it really depends on the young person, or on the child, or whoever I'm working with around what is it. You know, with the particular girl who doesn't speak very much, it's like, how can we help you find your voice? what characters can we play that do have a voice, and how can you try on that role and see what it's like to speak up and to be confident. But that might take a long time for us to get there. You know, and it may not. It may within the safety of play, and you know, we might be there next week. Yeah,
lovely. If people were interested in investigating more into drama therapy, or wanted to get started even with simple things, is there any advice that you might give, or any practical tools that you could kind of help people with?
Yeah, I actually have the one thing I've written down for our chat is three top tips that I kind of feel like are important for people to remember. So the first one is go slow. So if you're thinking of bringing drama or role into your therapeutic work, it would be to go slow. So look for signs of engagement and then work from there. So for example, someone might talk, often I've got kids who love Harry Potter, and so there's a wonderful window into, there's a sign, there's a place that I can start to work from, and working in their imaginary world there. The other one that I'd suggest is listen for the metaphor. So as a drama therapist, I work a lot with metaphors. So for example, you know, if someone's explaining their experience like a wave that comes over them, then there's your point of entry in terms of using drama and story. So create that wave, or work, you know, using that wave as your kind of launch pad. And the third thing would be to bring it into the body, and to play with it. So however you can shift it from just a talking cognitive approach, is to bring it into your body. So it could be as simple as you know, having a ball that you throw to one another as part of your conversation, or it could be that you use, you know, you don't sit on the couch, you might sit on the floor with someone. So trying to kind of bring the experience that they're talking about into the body somehow would be my other tip.
Wonderful. Those three tips, the going slowly, the listening for the metaphor, and the window of opportunity to kind of connect in with your client, all to me sound like being able to listen well, connect well, and be respectfully empathic. How in addition to those things, what do you think is important for you about therapeutic relationships, whether they're one-to-one or in groups?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I guess just building on what you've just said, to me, the key is to walk alongside. And so, I mean, from a physical point of view, I spend a lot of my time sitting alongside my clients that I work with, or on the floor, or in the space with them. And I think when you do that, when you sort of really get alongside the child that you're working with, you can begin to see it from their point of view, and see the world at how they look at it. And so, you know, so much of the work across, you know, however anyone's working with children particularly, is around just feeling valued and heard. And I always find that's a really, to hold that in mind, to really get alongside is kind of key.
Yeah, fantastic. It's been wonderful talking to you today, Natalie. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing about drama therapy, or about your experience in this field?
Yeah, well, no, thank you so much for having me. I really am looking forward to meeting some people who are daring to take off their adult hat. Very cool.
So I just want to say thank you, Natalie, for being with us today, and we're really looking forward to your workshop in both May and November in Sydney this year. And you can get onto Sydney Centre for Creative Change website to find out more about Natalie's great workshop and to register there for it. So thank you, Natalie, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.